Welcome to Highly Sensitive, Happily Married, the podcast that teaches you to not only have an easier marriage as a sensitive woman, but to have one that feels more amazing by the day. Where you'll hear relatable stories, love advice that works, and coaching on how to have a marriage where feeling upset and disconnected is a thing of the past, and where instead a sense of loving connection and even fun and lightness is the norm. I'm Hannah Brooks, highly sensitive person, love expert, and marriage coach, and I'm so happy to be on this journey with you. Hello, my friends, and welcome to episode 221. I hope you're doing great today. I myself am all right, sort of a mixed bag of emotions, and it's part of why this podcast is out slightly later than normal. We just yesterday dropped my middle son off at college, his first year of college, and I'm sure, as any of you know who have been through this, or who even imagine going through this, who have kiddos now, there's a lot of feelings that come up. It's a really big change, not for our kid, I mean it is, but for us as mamas and as parents. So I'm letting myself slow down a little bit, process a little bit more, taking care of myself. And it actually feels really relevant to what I'm going to talk about today, which let's just dive into. I'm really excited to bring you this episode today. So most of us know that a marriage takes work, but I think we've misunderstood what some of that work actually is. There really are two big pieces of work in a long-term relationship, like if we get the most generalized we could possibly get. And those are learning how to grow around what's hard between you and your honey, and learning how to truly learn into what's good there. And we need both pieces of work. But most of us, and especially this can be true for us as highly sensitive women, tend to do plenty of the first and not nearly enough of the second. Now, I love that we as highly sensitive, deep feeling women do tend to take things seriously in our marriages. I do think that this is an asset for your relationship in many ways. And it can also be incredibly easy to believe that taking our marriages seriously means taking every problem in our marriage seriously, like all the time. It really can be so easy to focus on the things that still need fixing or solving or changing because of how our brains work and our human drive to fix and solve and improve. But that means we miss so much of all that is already good or even wonderful right now, right here in our relationship. And it can really make a good relationship not so good. Because when you always carry the unresolved stuff around with you, when you keep it in the foreground of your awareness, you then always see your partner through it. And your nervous system continues to respond as though it's happening right now, the hard thing. So you're sitting across from your husband having an otherwise perfectly pleasant dinner, but you're also carrying the thing he said last week, like feeling it now. I bet you've had that experience. Or you're watching a movie together, but your brain's remembering how he didn't help enough this morning. Or you don't feel like holding his hand because your body's still feeling the way that he's not contributing as much as you around the house. Or you're noticing something sweet that he did in one moment, and then in the next, your mind says, yeah, but he still ... Fill in your own blank. I know so many of you can relate. Or we just don't even enjoy what could be absolutely enjoyable because we're too focused on what happened in the past or what needs to happen in the future between us and our spouse. We aren't able to see and feel and love and enjoy all the good attributes or the way in which we are great together, our partner and ourselves. Right? When we're letting these things, these unresolved things, be in the foreground of our awareness all the time. We can really get so focused on improving the relationship or fixing what's wrong with it or noticing what's wrong with it that we forget to actually experience all that the relationship is already offering. So I'm not saying the problem is that you care about the things that need attention. Caring about them is important and it's beautiful and it can be healing. It can be like the impetus that helps you change things for the better, right? The problem is actually when working on the relationship becomes synonymous with thinking about what's wrong with the relationship. And I have to tell you, I've seen this so many times with my clients. The problem is really that the unresolved issues stop being just an issue you have, and they become the emotional atmosphere that you live in. So hear me when I say a marriage does not only get better through fixing or resolving or focusing on the problems. It also gets better through enjoying, appreciating, connecting with, and experiencing what is already good. And another way to put that is the good isn't what happens after you finish doing the work. Seeing, relishing, and enjoying what is already good is part of the work and a very healing, very powerful part. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately because it's something that has really, truly made a huge difference in my own marriage. And I want to be real with you about what actually works to make marriage loving and connected and all the things that we want so much as HSP women. So my marriage definitely has things that aren't perfect, things that can sometimes feel hard, even still, after all these years and all I know and all the work I've done. And that is not only okay, it is how it goes, even in a marriage that is pretty awesome. There are always things to work on, always places two humans with all their patterning and all the challenges of being human, where all of that comes together and clashes. But what I've found in my own marriage and by helping so many others with their marriages is that we can have those challenges, those places where those clashes exist, the places we do not like our partner's ways or approaches or habits, and we can still have a wonderful, amazing marriage because of what we do with the things that we don't like how we relate to those things, and because of what we do with the things that we do like and love, like how we relate to those things. So I want to dive more into this topic today as it's something we HSPs tend to overlook way too much, and that so much relationship advice really overlooks too much as well. So if you don't have things that you find enjoyable about your partner or in your relationship, then that is a really good and important and in fact key part of your work. And the next podcast episode is going to be about one important way to work on this. But right now, I want to share more about this and why this is so important. So I'm going to invite you to do something that might sound radical or difficult or just different for marriage advice. And I do want you to hear me out. I'm going to invite you to set the hard issue or issues down for good periods of time. Stop carrying what isn't right or good between you and your spouse everywhere you go. Meaning, let the hard things between you and your honey, the same old conflicts that repeat over and over, the disappointments and anger you have with him, etc., put them in a box sometimes, over in the corner for long stretches of time. To use one of the metaphors I have for this today, give that issue or those issues a place in your house instead of giving them the whole house. And then leave that room for a period of time and let yourself enjoy the good things in all the other rooms of that house. And when you do go back in and you pick that issue up or those issues up, do so in effective ways that actually move the needle on them or help heal or solve them. So 2 things I want to say kind of up front here. 1, I know that this can be hard, especially for deep feelers like us. So I'm going to come back to why in a little bit. And the second thing, which I want to address now, is I'm not saying to set aside the things that have just come up or not to resolve and repair an argument. Do repair, do address things, of course. I'm not saying to suppress hurt or pretend something doesn't matter. If there's hurt there, it does matter, and I want you to attend to it one way or another. And I'm definitely not talking about ignoring abuse or betrayal or situations where your safety or well-being is at stake. Never, never, never ignore that. But I am talking about the hard things in our marriages, even important ones that we're working on and that might take time to change. Like some differences or issues that you don't agree on or are not fully solvable instantly. So I'm talking about when there are long-term differences, things you've not been able to resolve quickly. Like my example is my husband having a deep-seated defensive listening style. And of course, you've heard me talk about this before, and he and I have talked at length about how I'd like him to listen and learn to be open and curious and validating of my feelings before sharing his sort of defensive explanation. And he's definitely getting better at this, for sure. And he doesn't just suddenly become an expert at it when the defensiveness is so deeply built into his system. Like he's frustrated at himself at how hard this is for him, right? So that's an ongoing challenge. Or another type of thing I'm talking about with my ex, one of our ongoing issues was he was so indecisive about so many things, like even big child-rearing choices, that I ended up having to make all of those decisions. And that felt burdensome and exhausting to me, right? But he wasn't just suddenly going to become someone who was super decisive. So for you, perhaps there are issues like you want your partner to help more with the mental load, or be a more consistent financial provider, or eat slower to model healthy habits to your kids, or stop retreating into silence when he's upset, or any number of things that you don't like so much about him or his behavior, right? So things that you do want to change or be different. Or maybe there's one or more conflicts that really do keep coming up over and over, and each time it still really upsets you a lot. Like you get really triggered or you get locked into an argument with him around it, and it just feels so exasperating that it keeps happening. Now, although many of these things are possibly shiftable over time, if you're working on your role and communicating well from a strong basis of love and respect and an emotionally resourced place, but it may also be true that many of these things will not be solved quickly, but may gradually shift and improve. Some of these changes might take months. Some might take years of repeated conversations and growth. And some things will never change very much at all between you, but can definitely shift inside of you, like the way you relate to those issues. So I'm not saying ignore those things and they'll just go away and all will be well. That's not at all what I'm saying. What I am saying is that all of us have things like this in our relationships. That's part of having a relationship, being with another human being. But if you refuse to enjoy your marriage until all of those issues are gone and cleared up, you are likely to spend decades waiting to enjoy your relationship. So it is so important to be able to set those issues aside much of the time, instead of keeping them constantly in the forefront of your mind, always contaminating your heart. Because that's what it feels like happens, yeah? When we keep this hard thing highlighted in our minds, when we keep feeding these issues with our attention, with our dwelling on them, with our focus, our love gets contaminated. Our hearts feel hardened, like a lot of the time. Because remember, every thought you repeatedly return to, right? Everything you repeatedly return to in your attention helps create the emotional atmosphere inside of you and therefore inside your marriage. When you repeatedly turn toward the conflict or the problems that are still going on between you, the disappointment, the irritation, the things that are missing, those things don't just stay inside your mind. They leak outward and they really do shape the emotional climate between you. So then your husband feels less loved and you feel less loving and you both become more guarded, and then the good things are less likely to happen between you. Your whole relationship and the atmosphere of it feels heavier and darker, more divided and cold. And if you've listened to many of these podcast episodes, you'll know that this often leads to like a downward cycle in our marriages where tension and distance and pain between you just grows and compounds like a snowball rolling down a hill. So now the problems that you were trying to solve have actually begun to generate more of themselves. When really, despite defensive reactions, or the few hours of silence, or the lack of ability to make good decisions, or the places your partner still isn't stepping up, or the places both of your unhealed stuff gets triggered with each other, despite all of that, there is still so much good to enjoy from him, and with him, and between you two. So really hear this. You do not have to resolve something in order to stop letting it take up so much space in your relationship. You can care about something without constantly rehashing it and giving it your attention. You can work on something without mentally stewing in it and emotionally stewing in it all day. You can decide that something needs to change without making that one thing the lens through which you see your partner and your whole relationship. So take a moment and imagine with me for a moment. Imagine you've put a spotlight on the hardest thing in your relationship. And every day, without meaning to, you keep that spotlight trained there. You look at your husband and immediately see the defensiveness or the mental load that he does not carry, or his silence and withdrawal, or his indecisiveness, or that conflict that you keep having. And when the spotlight stays there long enough, it starts to feel like that is the relationship. But of course it isn't. The relationship is much larger than whatever the spotlight happens to be illuminating. So the work here is not to pretend the thing under the spotlight doesn't exist. It's simply to learn that you can move the spotlight. You can keep it trained wherever serves you. And I do want to be clear that moving the spotlight isn't just about feeling happier while nothing changes. That's not what I'm suggesting. Moving the spotlight actually helps create the emotional conditions in which positive change is more possible. The issue can absolutely still exist when the spotlight moves away from it. But it just won't be contaminating your hearts and your marriage, leaking into every moment or many moments throughout your day. Instead, the issue will simply be over there in its place. And when the time is right, you can return the spotlight to it, or you can walk back into that room that it's in and address it. And that's going to be easier because your marriage still overall feels strong and connected and loving. And a warmer, safer, more connected atmosphere or climate between you is just simply more conducive to the growth that you want, right? It's so much easier to address the issues from that place. Now, I know that shifting the spotlight like this, or setting the issues aside in their own room and walking into the rest of the house, is not always easy. I am going to address that in a moment. But even though the skill of keeping the spotlight on all that's good much of the time, rather than automatically staying focused on the hard, the bad, the wrong, even though this is something that most of us have not yet learned, and even though, especially at first, it can take real effort to develop this capacity, to have the agency and presence of mind and heart to step out of that intense pull towards what's wrong, it is a skill and a capacity that is so worth developing. Because when we don't let one problem become the lens through which we see everything, we give ourselves and our relationship a real chance to be good, even great, despite the imperfections that every single one of us brings into a relationship. When we can set an issue down because it can't be solved right now, or give it just a small room in our metaphorical house that we can come back to when the time is right, when we can move the spotlight away from that one thing and allow it to fall on the much larger array of what is lovable and lovely and funny and familiar and comforting and good in our relationship, while of course still coming back to the hard thing at the appropriate moments, still talking about it, still working on it, still chipping away at it. When we can do that, we give ourselves and our relationship the chance to be enjoyable again. And I don't mean enjoyable in some superficial, let's just have more fun kind of way. I mean we get to feel our marriage again. We get to have a conversation that isn't just about the relationship. We get to sit at the dinner table and actually enjoy each other instead of one part of our mind silently keeping score. We get to laugh at something ridiculous one of the kids did together. We get to notice the way he tells a story. We get to tease each other. We get to have one of those little moments where you look across the room and you think, oh, there you are. I really like you. We get to enjoy the familiar things that makes this your life together. The inside jokes, the rituals, the things you both find funny, the way you know what the other person's going to say before they say it. We get to have ordinary days that don't feel like an assessment of the state of our marriage. And maybe you just have a really lovely conversation. Maybe you laugh until your stomach hurts. Maybe he reaches for your hand, or you watch your husband with your children and feel that little swell in your heart that says, I'm really glad that I get to do life with this person. Those moments aren't distractions from the work of your marriage. They are part of the work, a big part. They are part of what makes a marriage rather than a problem-solving project. And the more we allow ourselves to really experience these moments, the more our hearts have something to hold on to besides the things that aren't working yet. And we begin to remember, not just on that intellectual level, but really in our bones, like deeply emotionally, why we love this person, why we married this person. And that really does change the whole experience of being married for the so much better. Now, again, I know this can be hard to do, as I said earlier. And for many of you, it may feel nearly impossible to set aside what's not going great or what's bothering you about your spouse's behaviors or choices or patterns. It may feel like the only thing you can see or focus on is those things. I get it. I, too, am highly sensitive and deep feeling. And like so many HSPs, that means I see and focus on what is wrong, sort of by default. And I take things seriously in my relationship. I linger in the wrong and the lack easily. And I let things loom, in a sense, in my awareness. Or at least that has been my default. The default way I've done life, and something that I've consciously changed a lot over the years. So I do want to just spend a minute expanding on why this suggestion, this important work, can be hard. Not to discourage you, but actually to encourage you, because when we understand that we aren't alone in this feeling challenging, and the reasons that it actually is difficult but definitely achievable, I've found that it helps us relax and actually have the wherewithal to do the work, to build the capacity to do this. So as humans, and especially as deep feeling sensitive ones like us, this is how our brains tend to be wired by default. Right? Many of us have nervous systems that are particularly attuned to what feels off, unresolved, or potentially threatening. This is part of the HSP nervous system, very much, right? Like more so. But it's also just our natural human instincts, all humans, to tend to focus on danger and unresolved issues. And when something matters deeply to us, as our marriage does, we tend to do more than just notice the problem. We tend to mentally return to it again and again. Add to that the high emotions that often come along with seeing things we don't like in our partner and our relationships, and those strong feelings make it tough to push a problem aside. So your brain keeps bringing it up because it believes that the problem deserves attention. But attention is not the same thing as progress. You hear that, brain? Focusing on what's wrong is not the same thing as making progress on what's wrong. So it can help to just hear that. Just like letting our brains hear that can actually help us set the thing down. Thinking about the same unresolved issue all day long doesn't necessarily move it forward. Sometimes it actually just makes the issue bigger inside you and outside of you. So really make it larger than it really is until it feels like it's contaminating so much of your relationship, like I said earlier. So instead of progress, because you're thinking about it so much, you get backsliding and much more pain than gain. So again, this is one reason I like to talk about this and help educate you about what's going on here and why it's hard. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. And your brain can stop repeating the same thing that actually causes more pain than gain. Yeah? So to put it more succinctly, you don't have to solve the issue before you're allowed to set it down for a while. You can decide this is real, this matters, we're going to continue working on it. And it does not need to sit in the front seat of my mind every single moment until then, or as we gradually address it. And here's another important piece of this that I do think it is really key to understand. Every partner comes with a set of things you will not like. Every single one. Because every human being is going to fall short of someone else's ideals and expectations sometimes. And as HSPs, we can tend to have pretty high standards for ourselves, for our relationships, for the people we love. So it really is part of the territory that our partners are going to fall short of those standards sometimes, or even often. And part of our work in long-term relationships is to learn how to love our partner with their shortcomings. And this doesn't mean we shouldn't ask for change where change is possible. Of course, we should. But loving someone doesn't require them to become the person you would have designed. We learn to make room for their messy humanness while also leaning into the beauty and goodness and wonderful things that are also there. We need to learn how to do that because honestly, both can be true about your relationship. Your husband can be a really wonderful partner in many ways and have some things about him that drive you absolutely crazy. Your marriage can be deeply loving and have some significant challenges. You can be grateful for your life together and still really wish some things were different. Both can be true, and one doesn't cancel out the other. I think of it almost like your refrigerator. If you opened your refrigerator and discovered that the cheese was moldy and the milk was sour, you wouldn't conclude that all the food in your refrigerator was bad, would you? You'd just throw out the moldy cheese, you'd pour out the sour milk, and you'd deal with what needed dealing with. But you wouldn't throw everything else away. You'd still have the strawberries, you could still enjoy the eggs and the leftovers you love and the good food you were looking forward to eating. I think sometimes we do the opposite of that in our marriages. We find the moldy cheese, and because we're sensitive and because we care and because we want our marriages to be good, we stare at it. We think about it. We analyze it. We wish it weren't there. And eventually we can start to feel like the whole refrigerator is bad, is contaminated. When actually there's a lot of nourishment and goodness sitting right alongside the things that need attention. The moldy cheese doesn't make the strawberries bad. And the thing that you don't like about your husband doesn't erase everything you love about him and everything that's good between you. The challenge in your marriage doesn't erase the beauty in your marriage. So, I absolutely do believe it's important to work on what is hard, to find ways to grow and shift those in those areas, or learn to be truly okay with them. And it is also essential to build on what is already good, to lean into it and grow it. But even before that, we can simply begin to learn what is already good while letting the challenging aspects take up only their appropriate amount of our attention at only certain times. So how do we actually do this? I'm not going to give you a big list of things to do here because I actually think the first shift is much simpler than that. I invite you to move the spotlight, like I said before. But before we can really do that, I think there's something important that you need to learn to do with the hard things in your relationship. And that is give them a room. Put them in a place. So if there's an issue that really matters to you, let it have a place in your relationship. So talk about it. Make the request. Have the conversation. Repair when repair is needed. Keep working on it. Maybe you and your husband have already talked about it several times and you're both continuing to work on it. Or maybe you've realized that this is one of those differences that isn't going to be completely solved overnight or ever. And part of your work is figuring out how to live well together around that. But once you've given it a place, you don't have to keep giving it your attention every minute of every day, or even every day of every week, or even every week of every month. It's true. So one thing to help with this is you can say to yourself, yes, this is something we're working on. And we can come back to this. Or I don't have to solve this in my head right now. Those things will help you set it down. Because there's a huge difference between addressing an issue and continually carrying that issue with you wherever you go. And if you haven't actually given your issue or your issues a place yet, if you're mostly ruminating about it or replaying it or building your case or imagining how things should be different, that's different too. At some point, the issue really might need a conversation or a decision rather than just more mental attention. So that's for you, those of you lovely ones who sometimes just hold things in and don't ever discuss them because it's scary to have those conversations. And the thing about holding it in like that and just thinking about it a lot is that your brain can make you feel like you're working on your marriage just because you're thinking about it. But thinking about a problem isn't the same as doing something about the problem. So once you've done what's yours to do for now, once you've brought that up, once you've looked at it, perhaps with your partner, once you've had that conversation, you can put it down. Not forever, but because truly your marriage is bigger than this problem. So this is where I want to invite you to make another small shift, which is when your mind naturally goes back to the problem, when you find yourself thinking about what he did or what he didn't do or what you wish were different or what still isn't fixed, one way to shift the spotlight is to ask yourself, what else is true? So it might be that his defensiveness came up. So it can be like, yes, he was defensive. What else is also true? Or, yes, I wish he would carry more of the mental load. What else is true? He also makes me laugh. He's wonderful with our kids. We have things we genuinely enjoy doing together. He knows me in ways very few people do. There are parts of our life together that are genuinely beautiful. Those things are true too. Yeah? And that's really what I mean when I talk about shifting the spotlight. So I'm not asking you to stop seeing what's wrong. I'm asking you to stop letting what's wrong become the only thing you see. Because you absolutely do not have to choose between seeing what needs work and seeing what is good. You actually need both. The problem comes in when the first becomes so loud that it drowns out the other. And when that happens, you lose sight of what's good and you lose access to the experience of being in love with your partner. So I want to leave you with a reminder of what I said at the very beginning of this episode. A marriage does not only get better through fixing. It also gets better through enjoying, appreciating, connecting with, and experiencing what is already good. And the good isn't what happens after you've finished doing the work. Seeing it, relishing it, enjoying it, letting yourself be touched by the goodness that's already there, that is part of the work, a big part of the work. And I think it's actually very healing, very powerful part of the work. Plus, it feels really good. It's the part of the work that is delicious. So I once heard something that really stayed with me, and I think it's really relevant here, which is that it is not the passing of time that heals your heart, but the passing through of experience. And I believe that some of those experiences can be the experiences you have with your partner when you're able to let yourself actually be there for the good. Like the laugh you share, the conversation that feels easy, the way he looks at you, the little thing he does that makes you think, God, I love this man, or isn't he sweet? Or the ordinary Tuesday night that's actually pretty wonderful when you aren't calling past hurts into the present. So those ordinary moments, those good, yummy moments, they matter. Those are experiences that matter. They give your heart something new and wonderful and good and healing to experience. They can actually patch up some of the pain from those old things that were hard and hurtful. And over time, as you practice allowing yourself to notice and receive what is good, and as you build more and more of that goodness between you, because that's also possible, not just enjoying what already is good, but building more of it, you actually have more and more of that goodness to turn toward. And eventually, the harder things can feel less like the whole ocean and more like tiny white caps in a big ocean of love. You remember that one? I love that one, that metaphor. So the waves are still there. You still notice them. And some of them might still need attention, but they are not the whole ocean. And that is really the kind of work I believe in for your marriage. So we're not ignoring the hard things. We're not pretending everything is fine. And we're not spending your entire marriage trying to fix what isn't working. We're also learning how to hold what is really hard while also fully experiencing what's good. And then from that stronger foundation that helps build, we're continuing to dissolve and dislodge and heal and solve the things that really do need your attention. So that is a big part of what I support women to do inside Sanctuary 1-to-1. We work on both sides of this equation, the things that are keeping you from fully experiencing the love that's already there, and the deeper patterns that are making the relationship harder than it needs to be. Because ultimately, Sanctuary is about helping you change the emotional experience of your marriage, inside of yourself and, of course, between you and your husband, and in the patterns that have developed between you. So if you've been listening and thinking, yes, I know there's so much good here, or there's some good here, but somehow the hard things have become so loud that I can't always feel it anymore, that is exactly the kind of place we can work from. So you don't have to wait until everything is fixed before you get to experience the love that is already here. And that is the best news. And if you want support with this, come work with me in Sanctuary. You can find all the details at the link in the show notes, or head over to hspmarriagecoaching.com and you'll see the Work Privately with Me button at the top there. And I want to wrap this up just by saying, in my own life, I'm applying all of this right now, not to my marriage. I mean, yes, also to my marriage, but more directly today and yesterday, and I'm sure for the next several weeks or months, to my son leaving. Like, I'm letting myself have those moments of addressing my sadness, and I'm also opening myself up to the many rooms in this house of my heart where there's love, and where there's memory of goodness, and where there's future times together. And then coming back to that room where the sadness is living again, and working with it and being with it and allowing it to move. So the capacity to work with our lives like this, with our relationships like this, is something that you'll be able to use everywhere in your life in really powerful, healing ways. All right, my dears, be oh so well.